What if Karbala was never meant to happen? What if the story we were taught of a rebel, a desert, and a martyr was really the last act of a journey that was supposed to end in Persia, not Iraq? Because in the year 680 CE, when the heat of the Hijaz still hung over Mecca, Husayn ibn Ali did something no pilgrim had ever done. On the 8th day of the Hajj, the day of Tarwiyah, he walked away from the Kaʿbah. Not in defiance of God, but in fear of an assassination plot spun from the palace of Yazid. The rumor spread like fire through Mecca's crowds. Husayn had abandoned his pilgrimage for a woman. A beautiful stranger had been seen searching for him around the Kaʿbah that week, sent, they said, by fate. In truth, she was bait, a pawn in a larger design to brand the Prophet's grandson a heretic, so that his death could be made legal. When night fell, armed men in red cloaks entered the city. They were Yazid's agents, disguised as pilgrims. Whispers reached Husayn that they would strike on the 9th day. And so, before dawn on the 8th, he gathered his family, women, children, and the faithful few, and rode north. Not toward Kufa, toward Ctesiphon, toward Persia. There, on the eastern bank of the Tigris, stood Ctesiphon, the ancient capital of the Sasanian Empire, home of his wife Shahrbanu, daughter of Yazdegerd III, last king of Iran. If he could reach her kin, the blood of the Prophet would join the blood of Cyrus. A new axis of power would rise, Arab and Achaemenid united against the Umayyad throne. But someone knew. The route was watched. Fake letters from Kufa would soon divert him westward. And a commander named Hur was already waiting in a plain called Karbala, 100 kilometers short of Persia's border, to stop him from ever crossing the Tigris. If that road had remained open, history might have been written in Farsi. If that river had been crossed, the center of Islam might have shifted east. But the gate closed and the world changed forever. Long before the sands of Karbala were stained with blood, a different story began, in the ruins of a fallen empire. When the armies of the Caliphate swept through Persia, the house of Sassan fell. Yazdegerd III, last king of kings, fled east, hunted across deserts, betrayed by his own nobles until he was struck down in Merv. His daughters were taken captive, their bloodlines scattered. One of them, veiled and silent, was brought to Medina. Her name was Shahrbanu, the noble of the city. And in that city, a young man of the Prophet's blood saw her, and destiny shifted. Husayn ibn Ali, grandson of Muhammad, son of Fatima, heir to a spiritual crown, married the orphaned princess of Persia. From that union, the chronicles say, a new light was born. Ali Zayn al-Abidin, the fourth Imam, the bridge between two worlds. In him, the blood of Arabia met the blood of Iran, the prophetic and the imperial, the desert and the throne. To the Umayyads, this was heresy, a union too powerful, too symbolic. Because Shahrbānu's lineage reached back not just to Yazdegerd, but through him to the legendary line of Cyrus the Great, the Anointed, whom even the Hebrew Bible calls Mashiach, the chosen of God who freed the Jews from Babylon. That same blood now ran in the Prophet's house. In the eyes of empire, that meant danger. If Persia ever rose again, it would rise not under its priests or generals, but under the banner of Husayn and Shahrbanu, a faith fused with royal memory, capable of uniting two civilizations. And in the private circles of Damascus, Yazid's council whispered the same fear. If the blood of the Prophet mixes with the blood of Cyrus, no throne will survive. So the marriage was buried in silence. The princess faded into legend. Some said she died in childbirth. Others said she vanished into the mountains of Ray, reborn as Bibi Shahrbanu, a saint of both Islam and pre-Islamic memory. Her tomb, carved into a cave north of Tehran, still carries the scent of two histories, the light of prophecy and the shadow of empire. But in 680, that lineage still lived. Husayn's youngest son, Zayn al-Abidin, bore both names, the holy and the royal. And when Husayn set out from Mecca, he carried not just the memory of his grandfather, but the hope of an empire reborn, an empire that Yazid could never control. That was the true threat of Husayn's caravan. It was not a revolt of swords. It was the return of a dynasty, the rebirth of a world that Rome and Damascus had spent centuries trying to erase. And so, as the caravan crossed the sands, another army began to move in secret. Not to fight him, but to stop him. To make sure the blood of Persia and the blood of the Prophet would never unite again. The story of Karbala does not begin on the battlefield. It begins inside the walls of Mecca, under the shadow of the Kaʿbah, where politics wore the mask of piety. The year was 60 after Hijrah. Yazid had just inherited the throne from his father Muawiyah. The empire was uneasy. Husayn, grandson of the Prophet, still refused to pledge allegiance. In Damascus, this single refusal sounded like rebellion. In Mecca, it looked like hope. So Yazid's governor of the Hijaz, Amr ibn Sa'id al-Ashdaq, received an order: end the problem before it leaves the city. But it had to be done quietly, without blood near the sanctuary. What followed was not an ambush of swords, but a play of rumors. During the crowded weeks of pilgrimage, a woman began asking for Husayn around the Kaʿbah. Some said she was a messenger, others whispered she was a lover. The name that spread through the alleys was Uraynab, a woman once promised to Yazid himself. Before long, Mecca was buzzing. The Prophet's grandson is chasing another man's bride. It was the perfect trap, a moral scandal, timed for the holiest season of the year. The goal was simple: to strip Husayn of legitimacy before the sword ever touched him. If the public could be convinced that he broke pilgrimage for passion, then a future verdict of apostasy would appear righteous. Inside his camp, Husayn began receiving warnings from old companions. Among them, Abdullah ibn Abbas begged him to stay hidden until the crowds dispersed. Another, Ibn al-Zubayr, offered him alliance against Yazid, but that too was a snare. Each path led to blood. Each voice around him echoed with uncertainty. Then came word from his cousin, Muslim ibn Aqil in Kufa: "The people await you. 10,000 have pledged their loyalty." The message was genuine, but the timing fatal. Because even as Husayn read the letter, Kufa's governor Ibn Ziyad had already crushed Muslims' uprising and hung his body from the city gate. The promise of Kufa was now bait. And in Mecca, the circle was closing. Spies moved among the tents disguised as pilgrims. On the 8th day of Dhu al-Hijjah, the day of Tarwiyah, when the pilgrims prepare for Arafat, word reached Husayn that assassins had orders to strike that night. So he did something unheard of. He turned away from the pilgrimage. He would not let blood be spilled beside the Kaaba. Before dawn, his caravan departed. The banners were plain, the women veiled, the children half asleep. To the few who asked where he was going, Husayn said only, "I go toward Kufa, and God decides the rest." But those who knew him understood. The route toward Kufa curved east, toward the lands once ruled by his wife's family, toward Persia. His plan was to cross Mesopotamia quietly, reach Ctesiphon, and seek refuge among Shahrbānu's kin, who still held estates beyond the Tigris. From there, he could gather supporters far from Yazid's reach. What he did not know was that his every movement was being tracked, and that the same letters which invited him would soon be used to entrap him. The game that began in Mecca with a rumor was now expanding into a full-scale deception, stretching from Damascus to Kufa, from the Kaʿbah to the banks of the Euphrates. The pilgrimage had ended. The journey had begun. And the trap was now closing around him, not by sword, but by story. When Husayn's caravan left Mecca, it was not the march of an army. It was the procession of a family, 30 men, a handful of women and children, and banners that carried no royal symbols. But folded within Husayn's saddlebag were letters, hundreds of them, each sealed with a Kufan name and oath. They had come to him weeks earlier, carried by couriers who risked death to cross the desert. "Come to us, O grandson of the Prophet," they read. "The garden has no gardener. The rain has stopped. We await your hand." Historians say there were 12,000 such pledges in total. Others count 18,000. Enough to make Kufa, garrison of Iraq, city of Ali, seem like a waiting capital for a new dawn. But these letters were more than politics. They were bait written in the ink of hope. Because in Kufa, power belonged not to the people, but to Ubayd Allah ibn Ziyad, the governor sent by Yazid. Ibn Ziyad was not a bureaucrat. He was a hunter. The moment he heard rumors of Husayn's arrival, he began a campaign of terror that would outmatch anything Damascus could imagine. He filled the mosques with spies. He hanged men in the market for whispering Husayn's name. He even bribed tribal elders to write false letters urging Husayn to hurry before the city fell into chaos. And so, when Husayn read those invitations under the dim light of Mecca, he was reading not messages of loyalty, but forged lures designed to drag him into a vacuum where no help would reach. To secure the deception, Ibn Ziyad sent a second layer of control. Muslim ibn Aqil, Husayn's cousin and envoy, was captured and executed. But before the news could reach Mecca, Ibn Ziyad let his death be hidden for weeks, allowing Husayn to continue his journey believing Kufa was still safe. Meanwhile, along the desert routes between Mecca and Iraq, new checkpoints appeared. Tribes loyal to the governor were ordered to report any caravan carrying Husayn's family seal. The corridors to the east, toward the Persian frontier, were blocked first. If Husayn attempted to flee beyond the Tigris, he would find the roads already closed. The route to Kufa was open, deliberately open, because that was where the ambush was waiting. By the time Husayn reached Zubala, the first desert station of Iraq, the first ripples of truth reached him. A rider brought him a sealed letter, the handwriting unmistakable. It was from Kufa, smuggled out by a sympathizer. "Do not come. The people have betrayed you. Muslim ibn Aqil has been killed. The city is no longer yours." The caravan fell silent. Some begged him to turn back. Others offered to retreat to Medina or to head further east toward Awaz and the Persian frontier. But Husayn, the son of Ali, was bound by something stronger than fear. The letters, even false, had invoked his name before God and the people. To ignore them would be to abandon the very trust his family had carried since the prophet's death. And so he said, "If I withdraw, the lie will stand. But if I go, the truth will live, even in defeat." Those words sealed his fate. He pressed onward through the burning plain, past Al-Thalabiyah, past Qadisiyah, where decades earlier the Persians had fallen to the Arabs. The same land now watched the blood of the Prophet's house retrace its path. And as Husayn's caravan moved north, another army began to move south, led by a commander named Hur ibn Yazid al-Riyahi, with orders to intercept, but not yet to kill. To block every turn eastward. To make sure the caravan could go nowhere but the plain of Karbala. By the time they met, the Tigris was only a few days away, the border of Persia, the land of Shahrbanu. But Husayn would never reach it. The letters that invited him had done their work. They had rewritten geography, and within days they would rewrite history. The road from Mecca to Kufa was never meant for families. It was a war road, scorching plains by day, freezing winds by night. The kind of road that tests the will of soldiers, not children. Yet on that path rode the last household of the Prophet. 72 companions, a handful of horses, women and infants wrapped in dust. And at their head, Husayn ibn Ali, the grandson of the man who once changed the world, now walking straight into its betrayal. The desert they crossed was not empty. It was a battlefield of memory. Every dune whispered of an older war, Qadisiyah, where the banners of Persia had fallen to Islam 40 years earlier. The same earth that drank the blood of Yazdegerd's generals now waited to drink the blood of his daughter's husband. History was looping. The victors of Persia would soon kill the heir of its conqueror. Husayn's caravan moved in short bursts, resting at way stations carved into ancient caravan lines: Zubala, Uqba, Shuraf, Al-Thalabiyya.
The wells were shallow, the heat suffocating.
The wind carried fine sand that cut the skin like glass.
Chronicles say the temperature reached 50 degrees by noon, horses collapsing, water skins splitting open.
At Zubala, news reached them that Qays ibn Musahar, Husayn's courier, had been caught and executed in Kufa. Qays had stood on the city wall and shouted the Imam's message before they killed him. "O people of Kufa, Husayn is coming! Stand with the son of your prophet!" His body was thrown from the rampart, his voice still echoing. At Al-Thalabiyya, Husayn's followers begged him to turn back. They told him, "The hearts of the people are with you, but their swords are with the Umayyads." Husayn replied, "They have written to me, and I must answer. If I die on this road, then at least I will die with intention pure." Then he looked east toward the faint outline of the Tigris, the horizon of Persia, and he whispered, "If God had willed, this caravan would reach the mountains of my wife's fathers." But fate was already written in the dust. When they reached Du Husam, a column of horsemen appeared in the distance, black specks rising from the mirage. It was the detachment of Hur ibn Yazid al-Riyahi, sent by Kufa's governor to intercept but not attack. 4,000 men against 72. Hur rode forward, sweating under his armor, and asked, "Where are you going?" Husayn answered, "To Kufa, to those who invited me." Hur replied, "I have orders not to let you reach the city." Husayn looked toward the horizon. Every route west led back to Mecca. Every route east to Persia was now blocked. The trap had closed completely. For 2 days they marched side by side, neither attacking nor retreating, a strange dance between honor and command. Then came the order from Kufa: drive Husayn off the main route into the desert. Hur hesitated. He knew the meaning: isolation, thirst, death without witness. But duty chained him. He steered the caravan away from the river until the sands opened into a flat plain between the Euphrates and the hills. The locals called it Karb and Bala, anguish and tribulation. It was the 7th of Muharram. The sun burned white, the wells were dry, the wind carried the smell of iron. When Husayn's men asked the name of the place, someone said, "Karbala." Husayn lowered his head and murmured, "Karbun wa Bala," sorrow and trial. Here we rest. Here the tents will stand. They drove the stakes into the sand, tied the horses to the palms, and unrolled the carpets of prayer. The horizon shimmered. Across it, dust clouds signaled Yazid's army approaching, first hundreds, then thousands. And in that moment, history paused. The grandson of the prophet, the son-in-law of Persia, the heir of 2 worlds, now surrounded in a wasteland with no water and no escape. The road to Kufa had ended. The road to eternity had begun. Karbala was never meant to be a battlefield. It was meant to be a crossing, a brief pause before the river. But the river became the cage. When Husayn's caravan stopped upon that barren plain, the Euphrates flowed less than a kilometer away. You could see it from the tents, silver under the sun, whispering through the reeds. Water, the very symbol of life in Arabia, so close that its reflection touched their faces at night, and yet forbidden to them. On the 7th of Muharram, the order came from Kufa: block the water, let no drop reach Husayn's camp. The wells were sealed. The guards posted at every path to the river. The heat rose past 50 degrees. Children's lips cracked, horses collapsed, the air shimmered like molten glass. The men tore open leather skins, pressing them to their mouths, hoping for one last breath of moisture. Nothing. In the Chronicles of Abu Miknaf, a witness wrote, "I saw the women of the Prophet's house standing at the tent's doors, hands raised to the sky, their eyes toward the river that mocked them."
The siege lasted 3 days. The nights were filled with silence, broken only by the sobs of infants and the call of the muezzin echoing from the enemy camp, a prayer chanted by those who were about to kill the grandson of the man who taught them to pray. But beneath the thirst, another war was taking place, a war of memory. Husayn's wife, Shahrbanu, the Persian princess who had once fled the fall of Ctesiphon, lay ill in one of the tents. Some sources say she had already passed away. Others claim she was with them until the final night. Either way, her name haunted the camp. Because to the Umayyads, she was not just a widow of Ali, she was the last ember of the Sasanian bloodline. Killing her husband would extinguish the bridge between Arabia and Iran forever. And that was precisely what Yazid's court wanted. The marriage of Husayn and Shahrbanu had been a symbol, the union of prophethood and empire, of revelation and kingship. If that seed had crossed the Tigris, it could have birthed a new Persian Islamic dynasty rooted in both light and lineage. But by cutting it down at Karbala, the Umayyads could erase that possibility for centuries. As the siege dragged on, the soldiers of Kufa began to waver. They could hear the crying of the children. Even Hur ibn Yazid, the commander who blocked the road, felt his chest tighten. On the 9th day, he walked to the edge of the camp and called out, "O Husayn, I did not know they would deny you water. I did not know they would treat the family of the Prophet like captives." Husayn looked up and said, "May your mother forgive you, Hur. Will you now turn?" And Hur wept, dropped his sword, and rode across the sand to join him. His name, Hur, meaning free, became the first prophecy fulfilled. But freedom came too late for thirst. That night, Husayn dug shallow pits with his hands, searching for moisture. Only dust came up. In the distance, the Euphrates shimmered, carrying the reflection of the moon like a wound that would never close. When dawn approached, he gathered his companions. His voice was calm, almost gentle. "They have taken the water from us, but not our souls. Tomorrow paradise will open its gates. Tonight let every one of you make his peace and pray." They spent that final night in worship, reciting, whispering, remembering. The women recited verses of the Quran that spoke of those who give drink to the thirsty. The men sharpened no blades. There was no point. They had already chosen martyrdom over submission. The siege of Karbala was not just physical. It was metaphysical, a reenactment of every empire's cruelty, every priesthood's fear of reform, every human being's test between comfort and truth. By denying water to the household of the Prophet, the Umayyad state denied mercy itself. The desert became a mirror, showing the world what power looks like when it loses its soul. And on the 10th day, the day of Ashura, that mirror would shatter forever. The 10th of Muharram, Ashura. The sun rose red that morning, as if the sky itself had drawn a sword. Silence hung over Karbala like the stillness before a storm. No one spoke. No one moved. 72 stood facing an army of 30,000. Between them stretched a plain of dust, burning, empty, infinite. And beyond it, the Euphrates glimmered, close enough to see, never again to touch. At dawn, Husayn led his companions in prayer. Their voices rose in unison, echoing across the battlefield. The sound reached the enemy camp, and some among Yazid's men wept, for they realized they were about to kill those whose voices once carried the words of their prophet. When the prayer ended, Husayn mounted his horse. He looked across the vast army before him, men of Kufa, soldiers of Syria, mercenaries of the Umayyad crown, and called out, "O people, you know who I am. Am I not the son of your prophet's daughter? Did the messenger of God not say, 'Hassan and Husayn are the masters of the youth of paradise'? Then why have you drawn your swords against me? If you hate me, let me go. Let me return, or let me journey east to the lands of my mother's people." But no one answered. The silence of the soldiers was more terrifying than their war cry. They were men trapped between duty and shame, between the governor's gold and their own trembling souls. Then from the Umayyad ranks, a single arrow was fired. It cut through the air like the sound of fate being sealed. It struck the sand beside Husayn's horse. And with that, the battle began. The first to fall was Hur ibn Yazid, the man who had once blocked the path, now fighting to clear it. He charged like a storm into the front lines, shouting, "I was the first to bar their way. Let me be the first to die for them." His body fell pierced with wounds, his face turned toward the sky, whispering the Shahada. Freedom, Hur, had found its true meaning. Then came one by one, Ali al-Akbar, Husayn's son, his mirror in youth and voice. When he rode out, the women cried out from the tents, for his face was so like the Prophet's that the soldiers lowered their spears in hesitation. But command was command. The young man fell under the blades, calling, "Father, I see the gates of heaven open!" Husayn ran to him, lifted his bloodied head, and whispered, "My son, after you, life has no sweetness left." Next came the brothers of Abbas, the lion of the family, the bearer of the standard. When thirst reached the children's lips, Abbas swore to bring water. He broke through the ranks, filled his skin at the Euphrates, and turned back, but arrows tore through his arms. The waterskin fell. He died at the riverbank, his body between the camp and the current, the symbol of mercy slain at the edge of hope. By midday, the plain of Karbala was a furnace. Bodies lay like broken stars across the sand. The banners of Husayn's camp sagged in the wind. The cries of women rose from the tents, Zainab calling to her brother, "Do not leave me alone in this desert." And Husayn, standing alone, looked at the horizon, eastward, toward Persia, as though he could still see the ghost of Shahrbanu, the bride of empire, waiting beyond the Tigris. He whispered, "O Lord, you know that I do not seek power or revenge. I seek only the reform of your people." Then he rode forward one last time. They surrounded him from every side, arrows like rain, swords like fire. Each wound became a verse, each drop of blood a sermon. He fell from his horse, his body torn, his lips moving still in prayer. Inna lillah wa inna ilayhi raji'un. To God we belong, and to him we return. The earth went silent. Even the Euphrates seemed to stop its flow. When the soldiers approached, no one dared to strike the final blow. But one man, under command, stepped forward, Sinan ibn Anas, and with a trembling hand, ended the body that would never die. At that moment, a dust storm rose from the plain. The horizon turned black. The wind howled through the palm trunks as if the world itself was mourning. And in that storm, history split in two. Because Ashura was not the end of Husayn. It was the beginning of something empires could never erase. In his fall, he became the axis of defiance, the fusion of prophetic light and Persian endurance. The martyr who walked into death not to win, but to reveal. And as the army looted the tents and set fire to the camp, the women and children were led away in chains. Yet even in chains, the flame of Karbala burned brighter than all the palaces of Damascus. The blood and the dust of that day would stain history forever. When the dust of Ashura settled, the battlefield looked less like victory and more like aftermath. Bodies lay under a red sun, unburied. The wind carried the smell of blood mixed with burning cloth. And in the center of that silence, the tents of the Prophet's family were burning. The soldiers of Kufa stripped the bodies, took their weapons, even their turbans. Spears lifted the heads of the martyrs, 72 banners of defiance fluttering in the wind. At their center, the head of Husayn ibn Ali. They say even as it rested upon the spear, his lips still murmured verses of the Quran. Behind them, a procession began, not of victors, but of prisoners. The women and children of the house of the Prophet, bound in ropes, driven across the desert beneath a sun that still blazed from the same sky that had watched their men die. Among them, Zainab bint Ali, sister of Husayn. And beside her, Ali Zayn al-Abidin, the Imam who survived, weak with illness yet destined to carry the line forward.